Hi, I'm Carol Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. Newsflash. We're 5 years old now, and for the first time we launched a career. I received a published book in the mail by Anthony Ehrlich with a note saying Stockbridge Updates was the first place to ever publish him. And now he's got a whole book. Congratulations, Anthony. It's terrific, and we're proud of it. There have been some interesting things in the last couple of weeks. Congratulations to the Conservation Commission. They finally, after 6 months, instituted a lawful fine against someone who, sorry to say, flaunted the bylaws for over 6 months. So congratulations. I hope that goes well. And for the rest of you, there was a marvelous sterling citizen at the same CONCOM meeting who came in and said, I was born and raised in Stockbridge. I have a new property, and I'm just here to see if there's anything I should do. So both ends of the spectrum. Look in the issue, and you'll see a little video of NBC comes to the porch at the Red Lion. Stockbridge won the most festive Main Street this year, and we are. And so NBC came to us and filmed it. The Community Preservation Committee met. We got a little bit of a rocky start. They mixed up the public meeting and the deadline for the grant submissions, which of course was very funny because you have to have the public meeting first. So they caught it and they rearranged, and we had the public meeting. Good news, bad news. The amount of funds available this year is lower than in the last couple of years. The chairman, Sally Underwood Miller, estimates about $238,000. The submissions so far are $850,000. So I guess not everybody is going to be 100% funded. The Town of Stockbridge Mohican Committee, newly established, with 6 members, 3 residents of Stockbridge, and 3 members of the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohican Nation came together. I was disappointed, and I'm going to track this down for everybody and get it into the next issue. There was an introduction when they talked about the goals, the hopes, the aspirations for this committee, and it didn't get on the recording for some reason, so I didn't hear that. And I would love to, because later on in the meeting, Shannon Halsey talked about reparations and repatriation. Very hard word for me to say, repatriation, and control of their historic narrative. And I hope somehow that all meshes in with what the overall goals were. And as I said, I will keep you posted. I am so thrilled, really, to have 2 very, very special guests talking about something that is so important to all of us. As you know by this time, General Electric polluted our rivers some years ago, and solving the problem, making a stab at solving the problem of that pollution, they signed an agreement with 5 towns: Lee, Lenox, Stockbridge, Great Barrington, and Sheffield. The medical director of the Tri-Town Health Department, 3 of those towns, Lee, Lenox, and Stockbridge, Dr. Charles Kinney, is here with us. Welcome. And Bob Jones, someone that you know from other shows, Board of Selectmen member, and very important official in Lee, Robert Jones. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us, Carol.
Bob, bring us up to date, because there has been more than one agreement. There was an agreement altered by going to court. There was then a transportation plan in that agreement, and now there's a new transportation plan, and I think you made some progress.
We did make some progress, and I keep telling folks, as well as the folks at GE and the EPA, it's a step in the right direction.
Oh, good.
We're not there yet, but it's a step in the right direction. And I'll go back to a year ago, in December of 2023, there was a meeting at Lee High School in which GE rolled out its first transportation plan. And it was a bit distressing to hear. The emphasis was on transportation by trucks. It was going to go through the main street of Lee, the main street of Stockbridge, other main routes. And quite frankly, it was disturbing. And GE told us at that time that they had looked into the railroad. It was just not viable. It was going to be trucks, and that's the way it was going to be. But through the efforts of many folks, including Dr. Kenny,
yes,
we had a letter from Parker Rodriguez, Chief Counsel for the Housatonic Railroad, that basically said, well, they've never talked to us.
Let me just introduce Charlie and thank you. He doesn't want to be thanked, folks. He's just doing his duty, but he has done yeoman service. And please tell us about how you stepped in and got a 70% or more reduction in truck traffic.
Well, thank you, Carol. I agree with you that this is an important subject for the whole community.
It is.
And I have to say that it is the community so far that's moved this along. And I think the way that this happened is most simply because people started to realize what was going to happen. The process that the EPA originally undertook, that started in Pittsfield, always involved a thorough analysis of what the problems were in the river. I give the EPA a lot of credit for that. And then a public, an opportunity for the public to understand with questions and give and take what the issues were, as technical as they were, and then a public comment period where people could actually put in their analysis of this. You know, in a democratic society, we don't ever know everything about everything, and we rely on people who have that particular component of knowledge to say things, and we listen to them and we trust them. Now this process led to, in 2016, a permit, which is really a direct set of directions for the EPA to tell GE how to handle this project. And at that time, in the 2016 permit, the major takeaway that I had is that everything is going out of county by rail. In other words, the polluted river material, the waste that had PCBs in it, would be excavated from the river and placed on trains and taken out of county to one of two different kinds of disposal things. They're dumps, but they've been put into place with our tax dollars. You know, we already paid for them, and they're handling different kinds of waste. And with respect to PCBs, we have high concentration waste that go to one kind of facility and lower concentration that go to another facility. All of it was going to go out by rail. GE protested this. As I understand it, it's a legal idea, so I'm not going to claim that I understand it perfectly, but my best understanding of it is that GE complained about the process of studying whether or not it was safe to have a dump in Berkshire County. And the they appealed to something called the Environmental Appeals Board, which is a federal, I think there are 3 people on it, of judges, a set of judges, that then looked at GE's input and said that GE was right, that the region had not studied this enough. However, the EAB said they didn't want to, they weren't expressing an interest in whether it should go to the dump or not. And I'll stop it there for a minute.
Thank you so much. And Bob, the upshot is that GE won, and you had a new agreement where they were going to keep all the less dangerous PCBs in Berkshire County. At that point, you came into office, and as I recall, you objected.
Well, I came into office because I didn't agree with that analysis. I and thousands of others, quite frankly, in the river corridor. So we started taking a look at, it was promoted as we have to start somewhere. This is going to be a cleanup of the river, but in an analysis, not just by people like me, not lay persons, but experts, geologists, hydrologists, PCB experts who are worldwide experts, looked at this site and said, this is the worst possible place for a dump. And equally important, this isn't really a cleanup of the river. There's not going to be a single PCB destroyed or neutralized under the current plan. Okay.
And as I understand it, one of the things that made it such an awkward site is it was on top of a watershed.
It is. It's on top of a major aquifer that was actually looked at by the town of Lenox back in the early 70s as a water source, a secondary water source for the town of Lenox. So we're putting this high-level toxicity chemicals, forever chemicals, they're called. They last forever. They're man-made. They don't exist in nature, and they don't break down. So we're putting this over an existing aquifer. The aquifer itself is actually about the same level topographically as the river. So we're digging this giant hole in a pit that's made up of sand and gravel, which is what you use for draining, and then we're using liners that are not guaranteed by the manufacturer to put in what is written as a dump that could, and I'll let Charlie follow up with this, that could take up dozens of acres, an 11-story high dump full of this stuff, and that just doesn't sound like a very good plan to most of us.
And Charlie, as the medical director of 3 towns, you have an absolute obligation to look at what is healthy. And if I recall correctly, you had 2 points. One unhealthy aspect was the length of time they were taking to proceed, which is 13 years. And the second is that some aspects of their procedure, like the trucks, were less safe. Could you correct me, fill me in?
Yes, well, the project has many potential concerns from the point of view of the health and public safety, many of which are very difficult to figure out. But the region, that is the EPA Region 1, I sometimes call it the region, they call themselves that, the region is very clear on one that I think is an important one, which is that the longer the material, this contaminated material, stays in the river, the greater, the more prolonged the risk to the communities downstream. And I agree with the region on this, and they've used this this argument to do a number of things. So, for example, they put through, in order to expedite this, we had a behind closed doors group that eventually led to a settlement agreement that came out in 2020. few days later, there was a national emergency declared by the federal government because of the COVID. And then a few days after that, there was a state emergency declared. Now, all of the elected officials and the officials in our towns became totally preoccupied with this. It was a 100-year epidemic. People were dying. People were afraid of dying. You couldn't do gatherings. You couldn't. You had to wear masks. We didn't have Zoom then. And nevertheless, the region went through with its usual process that it had done before and had a public comment period that really was put forward during the first wave of the COVID. And I don't fault the region for this. This was an unusual situation, but we really didn't get a good understanding of the potential health hazards and problems caused by all of the trucks that were put on us by this. And this became clear when the people did realize this. There was a petition with 2,600 signatures on it, 400 plus from Stockbridge alone. And the region, I give them credit for this. When GE proposed this last year, the region listened to us, and I give the region credit for listening to public input. So I want to tell everybody, when you have a chance, let the region know, let the EPA know by an official comment to them that you want to have something done. Otherwise, they don't know it. So I'll give the region credit for this moving along, but my major concern is the delay, just like the regions. And if you look at last year's transportation disposal plan that GE put out, and you compare that to the one that just came out this past October, you see that we really have an EPA, a local team that has listened to us. Now, the trucks are significantly diminished compared to the 55,000 truckloads that we're going to be going through our towns. There are a few ifs in the GE plan, but that is really an improvement. But still, the plan is going to take too long. And I think there are ways to make this shorter. The first way is to look at the entire timeline that GE has. Do you want me to go into that now, Carol, or what would you like?
I would just like to underscore one thing, and then certainly I would like us to hear more from our local expert. But I want to underscore what Charlie is saying. We moved the amount of truck traffic almost 70% downward. And we did that by civic action, by public comment, by working together and being loud and long. But it wouldn't go anywhere if people like Bob hadn't brought in experts and kept the public discussion going. And we didn't have someone like Charlie who said, yes, indeed, this is a health problem, and buckled down. Now, what are some of the things that you told us? What are these dangers?
Well, the first thing is that we now have the railroad being considered by GE. This is a big coup. You know, the EPA had not considered the railroad for use of transport fully. They looked at it superficially, but they hadn't considered it fully. So now we have Rising Pond, for example, down in Housatonic, is going to be taking almost all the material out of county by rail, which is what the Commonwealth wanted and what the EPA originally said we were going to have. The use of rail now opens up another opportunity. This is the key, okay? The use of rail and the staging that Housatonic Railroad tells me, their officials tell us, that we can set up, offers the opportunity to put various sites along the river where the hydraulic dredging that's now being proposed, which is another coup, it can be used. And if it's used simultaneously with using it to put it in the UDF, this is going to cut the time in half. So we have a timeline that says that it's going to take The UDF is going to start in 2027.
Tell us what a UDF is.
The UDF is the dump. It's the upland disposal facility.
Right.
It's a dump. The bottom line is that the hydraulic dredging of the pond and the areas around the pond constitutes about 85% of all the stuff that's going to be hydraulically dredged. And if we set up dewatering places at the Columbia Mill, for example, I spoke to the owners of the Columbia Mill. They'd be very willing to help the region to do this.
Let's let them know that we're going to put up a map so that you will be able to see, CTSB will insert it for us, so you'll be able to see the locations he's discussing.
But, the period of time to take this 85% of material out, I'm looking at the timeline right now, looks like it's about 6 or 7 years. Now, hydraulic dredging involves placing a kind of a boat in the water and pipes to suck out the debris, and then it's carried along in pipes to wherever it's going to go. There are many cleanups around the country where they have used multiple hydraulic dredging machines at once. Now, of course, that means that the place that is going to has to be able to accept all of that material all at once. I don't know this for sure, but my analysis of this, looking at this, is that the reason this is taking so long is because GE is only going to use one hydraulic machine, and the reason for that is that the dump itself is going to be a dewatering place, a place where this slurry of material comes to, and then they centrifuge it, they take the water out. It's a complicated process, but it requires a certain footprint. There's a certain amount of area, there's a certain amount of building that needs to be constructed, and I see that that's probably the limiting factor here, that you only have a certain amount of room up there to do that and make a dump in the same general area, the place to receive the material permanently. So if we put a similar kind of system to receive the hydraulic dredging and set up another hydraulic dredging boat, 2 of them, and used a different area like perhaps the Columbia Mill, which I understand would probably be suitable, and maybe even you would decrease the time for doing all this material in half. So instead of doing 7 years, you get it at 3.5 years. Now that's a significant health and public safety benefit. The region has always said that time is very important in diminishing risk. We can cut the risk in half if we do it that way. Now, if we had a second dewatering place up near the museum, near 5C, we could cut the time in 1/3. Now, the reason GE doesn't want to do this is because the dump will be smaller, and it's not as economically attractive for GE to maintain a dump in perpetuum forever when it's not as big as it wants it.
So I understand now the benefit, the health benefit to reducing the time. But Bob, as a municipal leader, that's reducing the time of interruption in daily living, in interruption to the tourist trade and the other things, is it not?
It absolutely is, and as Charlie says, there is potential there for decreasing the size of this landfill, if not doing away with it altogether. I just to follow up on what Charlie said, back in 2016, there was a plan, and environmental groups reluctantly agreed to it because it wasn't a bad plan. At least everything was going out of the area. 2020, everybody's heads exploded because this was not a good plan. This is the plan that's on the table right now.
Right.
2016, I was going to say we were a lot smarter now than we were then. We're not a lot smarter now. We were smart enough then to know that this was not a good plan. We're a lot more knowledgeable now about potential ways for moving forward that will be far more effective. So this is actually an opportunity with this new transportation plan. This is an opportunity for GE to come to the table with the EPA and interested parties in the river corridor, the towns, and independent experts to sit down and say, how can we do this in an economically viable way, a way that will diminish or do away with the dump, but also have a long-term plan for the cleaning of the river.
Yes. And folks, join me in thanking Bob Jones and Charlie Kinney for giving us information, and you heard it here. Take out your pencil and write a letter. Open up your computer and write an email. Come to the meetings. We moved the needle once, and we can move it again. And here's top line points to remember. Let's move it back to where it was in 2016. And you can request a high point list of what 2016 suggested. Let's shorten the time, because interrupting life, not cleaning up the PCBs as fast as we can, and moving them around our streets, heaven forbid, for a longer period of time is not healthy, according to our Dr. Kinney, and 13 years is a very long time. You don't have to be an expert to say, I don't want this interruption in my community for 13 years. Somebody start rethinking it. Remember, get the stuff on the train, and when you get it on the train, get it out of town. And one person, very conscientious, said to me, why do you keep suggesting that? If we don't want it here, why are we going to dump it on someone else? Very golden rule. I was very proud of that person. I said, no. What they're suggesting to build here is inferior to what our tax dollars has already built in another place at the end of a train line. And that's where it should be, in the most secure, best situated place. Again, Stockbridge Updates is so proud to have launched the career of Anthony Ehrlich. Look for his book. We were the first to publish him. This was so interesting, gentlemen, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.